Hi, this is Catherine Schneider from the Fitchburg Historical Society, and we are so delighted today to have Eileen Kellor as our guest. Eileen is a Fitchburg Historical Society board member, and she has done a fantastic job of putting a display together at the Fitchburg Library upstairs in the second floor of the Fitchburg Room. And so Eileen, what's the name of the new display here, and how long will it be available?
Okay. It's a really complicated title. It's called Fitchburg Schools. And it's called Fitchburg Schools because that's what it is. It represents Fitchburg schools from the earliest schools to the current schools. As far as how long it will be up, our plans are to have it up indefinitely. I personally think that there's a lot of content in there that people could engage in a lot of different ways. So we want to take some time, allow time for people to become aware of the exhibit, learn about what's in there, and then to use it as a resource. So my guesstimate would be at least a year, perhaps longer, and all of the items that we have on loan by individuals have given us an indefinite period of time.
Great. So it sounds like it will be here for a long time for people to really enjoy and come back to again and again.
Exactly.
To really savor and take it in.
Right.
So why was this particular topic of the past and present schools of Fitchburg, why was that chosen by the Fitchburg Historical Society to go on display?
Well, there were a number of reasons, and to the extent that some of them might have been my motives and that they were the board's motives, I think they pretty much overlap. But one of the main reasons is to show that Fitchburg, prior to becoming a city, had a very, very long history. The schools have been present in Fitchburg since the 1840s. And have been a very, very important part of Fitchburg's identity. So that was a really big part of it, to show Fitchburg's historic school system, and for people who are newer to the community to get a sense of what Fitchburg was before they came, and hopefully gain a deeper knowledge of the community and some of the longstanding issues. The other really big topic is we who live in Fitchburg know that it's a perpetual discussion and question, why doesn't Fitchburg have its own school district? So the hope with this display is that both by providing geographic and historical and physical visual information about the city, its size, and the history of its schools, that people will gain a better understanding of why A, Fitchburg doesn't have a school district, and B, develop some knowledge as to what the limitations might be to potentially create a school district. And at the point where the district's consolidated, why that would not have been a viable decision for the what was a town at that point. Mm-hmm. So those are the main goals. Mm-hmm. What I want to do is walk you through the display. We have a very simple title for it. It's called Fitchburg Schools, because that's what it is. It's Fitchburg Schools. And the main focal point of our display is a plat map. So this was done in conjunction with the city planner's office. And what I asked them to do is to provide a current map, a plat map, which is the actual physical geographic boundaries of the city of Fitchburg, and to include on it the 3 school districts that serve the Fitchburg residents. So you can see that the peach color is Verona, the blue is Madison, and the cantaloupe or melon color is the Oregon School District. What we also have on here, and this was done with the assistance of the city planner's office, are the current locations of the current schools, and those are indicated with the red Monopoly houses, because they are new, and the locations of the historic schools, and those are the small green markers. The purpose of this map is there's multiple purposes. One is to show the geographic dispersion of Fitchburg and just how big it is. The other purpose is to show the actual locations of the school districts that currently exist, and then to allow people an opportunity to compare their current school with where they would have gone had they lived in, say, 1900. So it's kind of a way for people to walk back in the past and think about their community well before that they became residents of it. Now if we go to the left, each school has a little placard, and it includes a brief summary from our Fitchburg Historical Society website that provides a very broad description of the school. It includes the years that it operated, So here we, for example, have district number 10, so that was school district number 10, Camp Badger School. And that was in operation for some or all of the period from 1857 to 1964. And it gives its location, which is 6048 McKee Road. So our goal with this information is that people can look at the school, look at the description, and then become familiar with that location. This location of Camp Badger is one that many people have probably driven by hundreds of times. It's where the current Serenity House is, and people would probably think of it as, oh, it's across from the theater. So our goal in this part of it, in part, is to help people become grounded in different parts of Fitchburg that they may not be familiar with, and get a greater sense of Fitchburg as a whole community and not just their own particular neighborhood. What we also have for each school where we were able are either artifacts or ephemera from that school. So for example, here we have a lunchbox and some weekly readers that our fellow board member Catherine Schneider is allowing us to use. We were fortunate to obtain either physical items or photos or copies that are associated with 8 of the schools, which to me is remarkable. These schools no longer exist as functioning schools. The last one operated in 1965, and so as much as we really hate to think about it, that's really quite a long time ago. So coming up with physical, tangible items from these schools was really exciting. And I'm hopeful, and I think that it provides a way for people to connect the history with real people and to realize that the past isn't that long ago in this case. We have some general description about the newer schools, and those we didn't really focus on because that's the current world. It's much easier to find information about these schools. I will note that we did not include any private schools in here, and that was my personal executive decision because my focus on this was to really identify the schools that serve the residents of Fitchburg. And even though, for example, Eagle School, which is a wonderful, great school, that does not serve all of Fitchburg citizens, and in fact, it serves a broader community. So there are, for example, Eagle School, and there's, I believe, some Montessori schools, but that wasn't the focus of our display. And we're not neglecting them, it's just not part of the purpose of this particular display. The photos, I'll just mention, that are with each of the schools, most of them are from 1914, and apparently there was a county-wide effort to document the district schools. So you'll see that many of them look pretty interchangeable. You could look at Stoner School and then look at Maple Corners School and go, oh wait, Stoner doesn't have this window up there. But otherwise, they were very, very similar physically. And that's not unusual. They were built with, low cost, simple construction, one room, that's what they were. Maybe one maybe would have had a wash area or something, but for the most part, they were just a basic physical structure that was a place for people to gather. The purpose of the plat map and one of the barriers in terms of coming up with this display was COVID hit. And in order to really have this display do what I wanted it to do, I really needed this plat map. So the idea has been part of the board's mission for probably 4 years, but once COVID hit, it became difficult to execute. Our plan with this initially, and it continues, is that we want to engage people with this in different ways. We want to come up with worksheets that a student could use and walk at this exhibit and go, oh yes, look at the school box, lunchbox, and what's different about it from what a lunchbox would look like now? And look at some other information and hopefully engage their interest to dig deeper into the schools. The way we solicited the artifacts and the ephemera, because how do you do that? I happen to have a few items in my possession because my late father and aunt had attended Lakeview School prior to its closing in 1930. But where do we get the rest of them? So we put a call out on our Facebook page, Fitchburg Historical Society Facebook page, asking for people to share information and items, and we had great response from that. I also put that on 2 Oregon Facebook pages, because for many of us, if we lived in this area, the Peach area, Oregon was our community of interest, and I received good impact from that. So the items you see for ephemera came from about 7 different individuals, either current Fitchburg residents or former Fitchburg residents who still had these items in their possession. And the locations, the confirmation of the locations was very important, in particular to a very important Fitchburg citizen, Bill Kinney, who knew the physical locations of all the schools. So he made sure that when we did this map, we were clear that Lakeview School was on the west side of Old Highway 14 and not the right side, for example. So what people will see on the map are physical locations that as closely as possible correspond to where those schools existed. And we will note that in many of these cases, there should be a historic marker that the Fitchburg Historical Society, in conjunction with the Oregon Area Historical Society, erected to show and commemorate the location of those. So that would be another great scavenger hunt for people to go through, see if they can find every one of those signs, and make that one of their summer journeys. So now, this half of the Fitchburg history of schools is the one that I have more familiarity with personally, because I grew up in this part of Fitchburg. So what we have here are a number of report cards from Bill Kinney, who is a person that many people know, the late Phil Lacey, another name that many people know. And we have photographs and newspaper articles that represent the schools that were on this side. I think one thing that is, I found really kind of charming and illustrative of how many school histories kind of developed is that this bell is noted. This was provided by the Kinneys, and it's indicated that it was used by Alice Watts Kinney at both the Cyene and Swan Creek schools from about 1896 to 1900. So one of the things that you might read historically, both for Fitchburg and elsewhere, is that school teachers would come into the area, and it was not unusual for them to marry someone from the community. So at that point, they might marry, and then of course a new teacher would have to be brought in because teachers were not allowed to be married. That's just the way it was. So we also have here a couple of things that relate to Dane County, because the Fitchburg was not unique. All the communities in Dane County had rural schools. And what they would then have is an end-of-year commencement. So what we found, and actually I had never seen this before among my family's items, was something from June 4th, 1927. It's a program. It's called the Dane County Common School Commencement, and it has the names of all the different the children who were graduating 8th grade in that year. So one of the really interesting things I found, because I just found it interesting, is on the back. We have On Wisconsin, it's a state song, but then apparently Dane County had a song called On Dane County. And this was not a one-time occurrence. I did find it in another document that represented the 1919 commencement. So who knows, maybe Dane County should resurrect that. We also I was able to find a photograph here, and this was provided by Winnie Lacey to the Dane County Historical Society, and it showed her mother when she graduated. And the story that accompanied that in the Dane County newsletter was interesting, because it talked about how her mother had wanted to continue her education, but was not able to go beyond 8th grade because of the requirements of the family. And I think it's easy for us to forget that even though it doesn't seem like that long ago, and this wasn't like the deep, prairie lands, there were still a lot of limits on women and when they could educate. So that is the main material we have over here on the right-hand side.
It's interesting, Eileen, that you have this display divided between the western part of the city of Fitchburg and the eastern part of the city of Fitchburg. It makes it very easy to locate where things are.
And I think it represents that there were kind of artificial unspoken boundaries between the two. There really wasn't a lot of mingling between the two areas.
And your school district would be really your center of your community.
Right.
And
Yeah.
sometimes going beyond those bounds, because those were the areas where people would associate with one another, and the school brought them together.
Right, exactly.
Schools are always such a central part of our communities, and so that information about the schools and how they have developed historically really helps us see where we are today and why we are in the position that we are.
Right, and I think because Fitchburg has grown so much and there aren't that many of us who have family ties in Fitchburg that go beyond maybe 50 years, we don't have that oral history that's been passed down of, well, remember when your grandfather went to this school or your great-grandmother. So this is a way to help provide some of that human dimension that adds some value to people's current community knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Eileen. And so the school districts in Fitchburg, maybe just briefly, there's Oregon and there's Madison and the Verona Area School Districts, as you pointed out on the display here, and is so well done because the color coding and so on. It's easy for people to pick up on that.
We wanted to have people be able to easily see where they are now and where would their school have been had they been here in 1900, for example. So the colors both help provide a distinction between the district, but then also, I think, help provide some scale of distance, which I think is valuable.
Why do you think the schools were put at the distance they were, those early country schools? What was the reason for having them dot the countryside in the way they were?
Typically, they were put in areas where there was some population density. Either there might have been a community already, maybe there was a store, maybe there was, like in the case of Lakeview where my father had gone, there was a stagecoach, so there had been a stagecoach house. So there was a reason why there were people populating there. Some of the others, if we look at descriptions of the schools that are provided on our website, ebbed and flowed. They didn't operate when there were not people in that community. So the purpose really was to provide education to students close to where they were located and to have enough students that made having a school operate viable financially.
And even to have students be able to walk to school within a distance that it wouldn't be so prohibitively far away that they could access the school easily.
Right, there was no such thing as a school bus to a one-room school. Maybe some hills and snow, but no school bus, yeah.
And what do you hope people viewing the display will take away with them?
I hope that people, first of all, look at the display. Even if they don't have children in school, that they look at it. Because if you have an interest in Fitchburg, it's going to give you a lot of information about Fitchburg's history, particularly if you dig into the individual school descriptions. Because you'll find some schools had many Irish names, some schools had many German names, some schools had Norwegian names. It helps provide an understanding of the history of Fitchburg in that kind of a way. I hope that they would also see that population is a big driver of schools and population density. So when we look at current Fitchburg and population density, and we look at would there be enough students just in Fitchburg to populate a school? That's a question. And then B, if there were, where would it even be? Where would that be? There's just no easy answer to that. I think an example of population density that struck me was that the school that my father went to, Lakeview, was closed in 1930, and students were then bused to Oregon. Well, my father graduated high school in 1929 from Oregon, and there were a total of 13 students in that senior class. So when you look at that number of students representing all the district schools that fed into Oregon, I think it gives a sense of how viable would it be for a Fitchburg-only school at that point, or at any point in the years subsequent to that.
So much to be learned from looking at that. Can you, I'm just so curious about how you put the display together, and maybe what some of the challenges were to putting this wonderful display together.
Well, one of the biggest challenge, first of all, was doing it. So once we decided to do it, we did it. The biggest challenge really was so much content. There's so many schools, and to provide more than just a photograph of each school. So what it is focused on is just a very brief description of each school, and our hope is that people who are interested will go to our website and dig down into more information about each school. The other challenge was content. How do we get content? And we had great response from that, from people. As I have mentioned, we have information representing 8 of the schools, which is phenomenal. Personally, for me, one of the challenges was I had to temper my own personal interest in Lakeview School with the broader school, which I think anybody who's doing something that has a personal interest has to draw that line of what am I interested in as opposed to what would other people be interested in. But I will say that one of the items that I found in my aunt's school book from grade 7, her science book, was, and it's in our display, apparently they had to learn about septic systems and how they were structured and their purpose. So that was revealing because like, you're in the country. Yeah, I guess you did need to know about septic tanks and septic systems. So that piece of personal family interest I did think was of value to more people than just myself.
Yes, it's fascinating, and to find that balance, which you've done so beautifully, because all of the schools are so well represented here with their artifacts, their pictures, their the items that you've chosen so carefully to put in the display case.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
You are very welcome. Thank you for doing it for us. When you were doing your research, did you find out any particular fact that really was interesting, maybe stands out to you?
For me, I come from a large family. I'm the 10th of 11 kids. 10 of us lived to adulthood. And my siblings range in age from 64 to 87. So in talking to my siblings, my older siblings, about the school and their memory of Lakeview School, because that's the one that was on my grandmother's property, it was really interesting to just see how over the course of a few years people's memories were different. The older siblings remembered that school. They remembered seeing that school. It wasn't functioning, but it was a structure. We have a photograph of the school being carted off on the back of a truck and being brought to Oregon and being used as an auxiliary classroom. But beyond that point, then none of us had knowledge of that school. So to me, it was interesting personally to know that that school had been carted off, used as classrooms, and my siblings remember that happening at the public school, that you use these classrooms as additional space when you had population explosions. And then the second one is that it really illustrated is that how quickly history evaporates and knowledge of events is gone. So within a span of maybe even 2 years, you could have people who knew and experienced something and then people who had no awareness of it. So to me, it reinforced the value of codifying and capturing current history, because if we don't, it's gone. And I would hope too then that people will think of the purpose of a historical society is to not always documenting the past, but to make sure that we're capturing our current world.
Oh, thank you, Eileen. That's so well said. And we thank you for putting the display together for all of the community to enjoy here at the library. So Eileen, thank you so much for your time today with the interview, but also for just your passion for the display and how well you put it together.
Well, you're very welcome. I enjoyed it.